It so happens that you've been selected for the dearMoon mission that will fly Starship once around the moon with 9 people on board. You are one of those people. So just pause to take that in. Everything that we've been talking about, you will not just be reporting on, you will be a part of it. So tell me about the objective of this mission, and how does it feel to be a part of it?
Well, man. Yeah, it's basically, it's the Willy Wonka of space. Like a generous, a generous individual purchased a ride from SpaceX as early, at least as far as I know, the earliest I knew about it was February 27th, 2017.
Who's the individual?
Yusaku Maezawa. But at the time, I'm telling a story. At the time, we didn't know.
Okay, great. Great.
So February 27th, 2017, a press release comes out from SpaceX saying someone purchased a ride through us around the moon. We're going to fly someone around the moon. And at the time, it was on a Crew Dragon capsule and a Falcon Heavy. It's like, wow. And that was enough. That little moment right there, that press release. It's the first time I'm like, I'm going to make a YouTube video about this. I stood up, turned on my camera, put on my, at the time, spacesuit. And I basically yelled at the camera for 3 minutes about someone's going around the moon, you know. Fast forward to 2018, end of 2018 or near the end, they introduced, there was a SpaceX press conference. I'm there as a member of the press. I'm reporting on, we're going to meet this person that's going around the moon, and come to find out, boom, they're going to be riding on Starship now. They changed from Falcon Heavy and Dragon. SpaceX is no longer going to do that. They're going to upgrade them basically to Starship. So instead of being in like a small tin can, they're in this giant, luxurious, you know, mega rocket around the moon. And it comes out that this individual named Yusaku Maezawa, who is a Japanese billionaire, purchased this ride. And instead of inviting, you know, his friends and, you know, colleagues and whatever, whoever, his family members or whatever, he decided the most impactful thing he could do with this opportunity is invite more or less artists. In the original thing, it was like artists, you know, journalists, a painter, an athlete, photographer, videographer, you know, all walks of life, basically.
When they said athlete, they thought of you.
They're like, I know a guy. This guy rode Ragbri once. And at the time, you know, I was like, this is crazy. I can't believe this is going to happen. And, you know, he had this vision of, we're going to find people from all around the world. I'm going to invite people from all around the world, from different walks of life, different, you know, trades. And I'm going to share this experience so that they can share it with the world and really have an impact much greater than, you know, any one country or any one individual or any, you know, set of military trained, you know, astronauts could do, offer up a new perspective. Beautiful. I mean, at the press conference, I cried. Like, I had a couple tears in my eyes. I was like, this is so cool.
We could just pause on that. So he goes by MZ?
MZ, yep.
How incredible is that? I think it's, you often don't realize the importance of individuals in human history. Like they define, because this could be, we talked about the importance of Elon in particular. You know, most of the work is done by large groups of people that are collective intelligence that we band together. But like, these individuals can be the spark of the catalyst of that progress. And I mean, just this idea of getting not just civilians, which is already incredible, but civilians with a sort of an artistic flame that burns inside them. They're able to communicate. Whatever they do, are able to communicate something about that experience. And it's just a genius idea to spend quite probably a very large amount of money for that. I mean, and that will be part of history.
Yeah. And it's easy these days for people to be cynical, you know, especially about like space flight and wealthy individuals. But really, in my opinion, and maybe, you know, just at the time, I was just couldn't believe this idea. You know, I'm someone that has studied a lot about, you know, the Apollo program, the people that have been to the moon, and they're incredible individuals, but they're so saturated with tasks, you know, and they're military trained and often that they didn't really have the luxury of just being able to soak in the experience of going around or to the moon and seeing the moon up close with your own eyes. Like that just psychologically has to be insane. And so to have this opportunity to be able to observe our closest celestial neighbor with your own eyes, and your sole purpose is to soak it in and share it and communicate and create with the rest of our planet, like that to me is just beautiful.
So that is the objective of the mission.
That right there is the objective of the mission.
And how does it feel to be selected as one of the 9 to do it?
It's a gradient. It's doing a few things. Since I've known, it's become, I think the closer it gets, the more excited and the more nervous I get. You know,
the more real it becomes.
The more real it becomes. You know, the announcement was a big, it just got announced at the end of 2022 publicly, who's involved. And so, you know, prior to that, like I had, you know, each step of the selection process, you know, there's a pretty comprehensive selection process with interviews and stuff. Each step I'd try not to get my hopes up. And frankly, like this, let me be clear, this was not something that like I've always wanted to do. You know, it's not like I'm out there. I didn't start doing YouTube videos because I wanted to even go to space. Like none of that. And I've said hilariously, I've probably said dozens or hundreds of times on air, like, yeah, I don't ever want to go to space because it's not like it's not a driving force. It's not really a thing I even really truly pictured or let myself fantasize about, frankly. So each step of the selection process, I didn't really let myself dream about it too much, or, you know, but it would kind of chip away like, oh my God, this is actually becoming more real. This is actually more and more of an opportunity. And I get equally more nervous too. Like, you know, frankly, I've seen spaceflight stuff go wrong. I think about this stuff a lot. So like, yeah, I get more nervous, but I also get more excited about that opportunity. Like it's an opportunity that how can you pass? I still have to actually stop, pause, think, and actually realize the reality that I am going to the moon. I'm going to see the moon up close, flying around the moon. I'm sorry, some people get mad when I say going to the moon since I'm not landing on it. But flying around the moon, seeing the far side of the moon with my own eyes.
And seeing Earth.
And seeing the Earth rise behind it. Yeah. It's going to, I can't tell you what it's going to be like and feel like.
So epic.
But it's insane to me that like we're having this conversation and that is my reality, you know, like, and that someone was generous enough to consider the option of sharing this with frankly strangers.
Yeah.
And the process that they had for selecting, like how much thought and time went into the selection process is incredible. You know, they did a public call at the beginning of 2021. And so the team's involved in whittling it down from 1 million applicants. There's 1 million applicants that whittled it, and they got it down to 8 crew members and 2 backups.
Yeah.
Amazing people. I would have, you know, I don't know how they wound up where they did, but it's incredible. I feel a very deep connection to everyone that's already involved. And
what can you say about the crew? You've gotten a chance to meet them and talk to them, and Steve Aoki's on the crew. Like who else is there? So you are obviously the star athlete on the team. Who else in terms of the artists that are there?
So, oh man, we might just want to pull up just so I don't totally butcher and forget anybody, but because so far I haven't actually had the chance to meet everyone in person. You know, so far a lot of this was done during the pandemic, but we've met through a couple different things. We've had a couple different times to get together, but so far I have not met Steve Aoki yet or Top. We've been on calls and stuff. I also have not yet met Dev Joshi, who is an actor from India. So yeah, we can Steve Aoki, American DJ and producer and musician. Top from South Korea is also a musician and a producer.
So this is all across the world. So like truly global, all different kinds of walks of life.
Yes.
All artists of different forms.
And Steve is Japanese. His parents are Japanese, but he, you know, born and raised in the United States. Yemi is a dancer and choreographer from the Czech Republic. Rhiannon is a fine art photographer from, well, England and Ireland. I guess she lives in both and kind of a bit of she's all over the place. Technically, she's Irish, I guess. Tim Dodd, yep, that's me, from the United States. Mm-hmm. Then you have Kareem, who is from England and also is a photographer and documentarian. Does a lot of work with oceanography and volcanoes. So he does really incredible work. Brendan Hall is a documentarian and filmmaker. Dev Joshi, Brendan is also from the United States. Dev Joshi is an Indian actor. I believe he's also already been producing and things. He's very young. I think he's only like 19 or 20, and he's been acting since he was like 5 years old or something. He's a Bollywood star. Like, he is a star in India, which is really cool.
Right.
Caitlin Farrington from the United States is an Olympic gold medalist snowboarder. So she, believe it or not, is the athlete and not me.
Sorry.
And then, and she's one of the backup crew members, as so is Miyu from Japan, who's a dancer.
Oh, that's amazing. I mean, it's such an interesting group. I mean, is there something else you could say about MZ? How about Yasaka Maezawa?
Yeah, Yusaku Maezawa. So he's also a musician. So he was actually in like some kind of punk hardcore Japanese bands in the 90s and stuff, and early 2000s. He started a record company and distribution and sales. Ended up in fashion, and owns one of the biggest fashion companies in Japan, and has become a fine art collector and just kind of a philanthropist.
And he's been out to space already.
He's already not only been to space, like, you know, he's been to the International Space Station. He's been on orbit and on the ISS. And so what's cool is, like, you know, there's talks of, when there's, frankly, to be honest, like, I still don't know all of the details about this. You know, we're not yet into training. I kind of always assumed prior that there'd be some professional astronaut. You know, when they talked about it in 2018, there's talks of we'll have a professional astronaut on board. But realistically now, like, MZ is a trained astronaut, you know. Mm-hmm. He has trained for a long, like 6 months, you know, plus, to be able to fly on Soyuz. So as far as, like, it's good to know for me that I have someone on the crew that has experience with spaceflight, has trained and has some knowledge on spaceflight as well. You know, that is an important aspect for sure.
So you made an excellent video about flying in a fighter jet that I think you mentioned may be relevant to the training. Is there some high-level aspects to training that you anticipate that you might be able to speak to?
Yeah, so, you know, so far I think we can really lean on what has happened with the other, you know, commercial crew missions and in private missions like the Inspiration 4 mission or Axiom, where SpaceX flew individuals. They trained for about 6 months. A lot of, like, reading manuals and learning the spacecraft.
Are you going to do like a Rocky 4 montage or something?
I hope I just get shredded. I hope it's physical, a lot of physical training.
And they're like, we didn't tell him to do that. He just seems to want to film himself shirtless in the snow. It doesn't make any sense. How is this relevant?
Why is he always doing this? I can't get him to stop punching meat. So yeah, hopefully, realistically,
that's a manual reading. I like it. But there's a physical component to all of this, and that's really, I mean, that's fascinating. And it's also inspiring that sort of civilians can do this. That's really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, this is, and to me, this represents this and the other commercial space, you know, private spaceflight missions like this represent really a turning point, like truly an inflection. And again, it's easy for people to be cynical that, oh, you know, why are people wasting all this money doing spaceflight stuff? It's like, well, I'm sure some people were saying that same thing about, you know, airplanes and early aviation, going like, can't believe those people are wasting the government's, you know, funding these stupid planes and stuff. How's this ever going to benefit me? And nowadays, like, imagine if all the planes just stopped working. Like, we'd freak out. Like, our economy would collapse. Yep. It would suck, you know? And it might be a long time before we get to that reality with spaceflight. Well, no, if spaceflight halted today, you know, space assets, all of our, you know, on-orbit assets, our life would be crippled. And I don't think people realize that. Yeah. So we're already reliant on it. Yep. But now we're getting to the point where we're really turning that corner where it's the average person alive today. You know, if you're born, you know, now or from now on, I think there's a real decent chance that by the time you pass, there's an opportunity to have flown in space.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm being honest, I still haven't lost the feeling of magic of flying in an airplane. I often catch myself thinking, like, how is this real? And like the contrast of this incredible thing that's incredibly safe, flying through the air, taking off and landing, while everyone else just looks bored, watching, like, I don't know, some romantic comedy on their phone with Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
So it's just, it's like the contrast of that is like, wow, we're we're incredible. We're incredible as a society, and it's like we develop some amazing technology that improves almost immeasurably our quality of life, and then we take it for granted, and now still reach for the next thing and the next thing, and life becomes more beautiful and complex and interesting. And yeah, it's just the same stuff will be happening.
Oh yeah.
With space travel.
Oh, it'll become mundane and boring at some point.
The tough thing about space travel, of course, uh, I don't even know if it's such a giant leap over airplanes, because airplanes are already incredible. But the tough thing with space travel is the destination, right? Is the landing on whole other worlds, whether it's docking with different transport vehicles, or the space station, or it's landing elsewhere. I mean, it really is incredible. I think you mentioned, since there's artists, there's filmmakers, and so on, and you're all of those, on top of being a great athlete. I don't know. I'll just stop the running joke at this point. But have you thought about, just in general, like we've offline talked about microphones and like all the different ways to film space launch, rocket launches. Have you thought about the different options of like how to capture this? Have the team have been like brainstorming and thinking about this? Do you anticipate it being super challenging? Because there's so many opportunities to sort of think of how to do this.
So one of the fun things to remember is that Starship is huge. Like its internal volume is, the pressurized volume on Starship is bigger than a 747's pressurized volume. And it can take 100 metric tons to anywhere with enough refueling. So we have, in theory, very little mass and volume constraints. Mm-hmm. Unlike all other spaceflight missions ever, you're counting, grams down to, and just really can't risk, you have very defined parameters on what you can and cannot do. We're going to likely have the luxury of being able to film and capture this in a way that's just never been done before. We won't be inhibited by mass and volume constraints like prior.
Yeah.
So all that said and done, I'm hoping that we'll be able to just arm ourselves to the teeth with the absolute best cameras and equipment possible, backups on backups, and and pre-wire, like pre-rig things. Starship is going to be a transportation system, and it has, it's being built from the ground up. There's no reason why they can't put infrastructure in for cameras that are just housed in the vehicle. These are talks that I'm excited to have, because I really, ideally, one of the things I'd love to do, I'm going to be pushing really hard to actually try live streaming from inside during the launch.
During the launch, live stream from the inside, that would be incredible.
Wouldn't that be?
If that's possible to pull off, that's really, really incredible. Now there is the magic to the live stream, because like that's real. That's right there. The world would tune in. That would be truly inspiring. Yes.
To me, that's one of those things. A lot of people ask why they aren't doing it. Of course, NASA and other individuals have their reasons of why not. There's obviously some technical hurdles, but now with Starlink and other capabilities, there's less hurdles. There's obviously some transparency reasons why, and safety reasons why it might not be a great idea to live stream a risky rocket launch. The Challenger, I think, put a pretty bad taste in our mouth as far as publicizing an event and having every student in the United States tune in to, a tragedy. But that's something I'm pushing for really hard, just because I think it could be magical. I think it could really connect with people in a way that hasn't been done before.
Speaking of Challenger, have you thought about the fact that you're riding a thing, as we've been talking about, that's a giant, explosive, powerful rocket? Have you thought about the risk of that, the danger of that? Have you contemplated your own mortality?
How could I not? I've seen and felt 4 of these prototype vehicles blow up, with my own eyes. I don't know if there's anyone else, early days, some of the, Mercury and Gemini astronauts watched failures of rockets and then got on them. I don't know of too many people that are dumb enough to do that, though, this day and age. it's obviously, I will have to see a lot of successful launches and have to have a lot of confidence and in the engineering, the data, that they've developed a safe system. Because currently, the current iteration of Starship has no abort system, has no escape tower. So, Dragon capsule, which is currently flying people, has a launch abort system. It has Super Draco engines that, either by the push of a button or by the automatic triggering of the flight computer, can shoot the capsule off of the rocket in milliseconds and pull it safely away, get it far enough away that it can pull the parachutes and safely splash down. Starship, by all iterations I've ever seen, does not have that. The space shuttle also did not have that. So it's not absurd to not have an abort system. Like there is, certain engineering principles that prove that could be a completely valid thing. The space shuttle flew 133 times fully successfully. It did have 2 failures, resulting in the loss of 14 lives. 98.5% success rate. Pretty,
Yeah.
There's I've probably done things that are a lot riskier. I have raced motorcycles, drag race motorcycles, and, ridden like an absolute jerk on the streets on a motorcycle. I'm sure I've had a higher than a 98.5% survival rate, or lower than that. At some point. So it's yes, it's risky, it's scary. And, I think about it a lot. It definitely is one of those things that I will have to see. And I'm in no hurry for this to happen either. Personally, I'm in no hurry, because it's like, I would rather see this thing be developed and iterated and see 10, or I was going to say 10 dozen, but I'd be happy with a dozen fully successful, like, oh, we've got this thing totally nailed down, before I get on it. And that likely is the reality. There will likely be a dozen or 2 or 3 launches, because just even to get to the moon on Starship, they have to refuel it in orbit. So it will get to Earth orbit basically empty and out of fuel. So I'll have to dock with a fuel depot, fill up, and then go to the moon. So just to even get that full, we're already talking about, a handful of launches. So there will be a lot of launches before we fly.
Would they do a test flight without humans on board that goes to the moon, or no?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure if they'll do that exact flight profile, but by then they will have already flown. Most likely the Artemis 3 program will have flown a Starship variant to the moon that lands on the moon. So at that point, you're pretty much, I would like them to test the heat shield at that entry velocity, though, because it is, it takes it's about 30% faster to get, like, you have to go 30% faster than low Earth orbit to get out to a translunar injection. And although that only sounds like, oh, it's 30% faster, it's, the reentry heating experienced by a vehicle goes up by velocity cubed, not squared. So, and not linear. So it's not like if you go twice as fast, you see twice as much heat, 30% faster, 30% more heat. It's not squared. It's not go twice as fast to get 4 times as much heat. It's go twice as fast, get 8 times as much heat on reentry. So 30% faster on reentry is actually a really, really big deal. So I would love to see that be tested. There's certain things that I would love to see, milestones that I would love to see tested out and proven before I get on board. But at the end of the day, I really do believe that just like Falcon 9 and the success of that they're going to push it and get all the kinks out well before anyone's on top of it. Nowadays, Falcon 9 and Dragon is, arguably one of the safest, most reliable, and best rides you could take to space.
Are you afraid of dying?
Yeah.
Is this one of the first times you're young?
Yeah.
Have you gotten a chance to think about death as one of the first times you've really contemplated it?
Yeah. Like I said, I've had dumb moments on motorcycles where I kind of saw, like, I'm going to smash into this thing at 120 mile an hour, and I'm going
So you've had moments when you realize it could end just like this.
Yes. Where you literally, I have for most of my adult life had dreams of falling and hitting the ground, and it just you get a ringing in your ears, it all goes black, and in my head I go, oh shit, that was it.
Have you seen a therapist about this? Or
I
wonder what it means.
So I'm
sure there's a Freudian interpretation somewhere in there that I'm going to also apply to my dating life. No, the joke is the running joke continues. Okay, so I mean, it's fascinating in general, as I hope we'll talk about in the early days of spaceflight. That there is a the task of reaching out to the stars is a fundamentally risky one. You have to take risks, and of course, there's really rigorous safety precautions and so on. But it's still a risk.
Well, and I think like most people, the for me, the idea of dying isn't so much about myself; it's about those affected by it. You know, my loved ones, my family, you know, my girlfriend, my friends. You know, obviously, I don't want to have this be a traumatic experience for anybody. You know, it's already going to be hard. Like it's already. I know my mom gets my parents and family and friends are very supportive. And you know, my parents are, you know, all about it, of course, but my mom is also very emotional too. So, you know, speaking of athletes, my brother-in-law has actually been on American Ninja Warrior 2 seasons. Phenomenal athlete. And even just when he competes, my mom gets so emotional, like she can't even hold it together seeing that. So what's it going to be like when she sees her son get on top of a skyscraper and ascend on a column of flames into the heavens? Like that's going to be very difficult, you know. And I've taken them out. They've seen Starbase and they've seen Starship. They've seen a couple launches.
I don't know if that's going to make him feel better.
Hey, exposure therapy, I guess.
Exposure therapy. Okay. Have you had that conversation with them about this, like before agreeing to join? I mean, was that what that was, or is it one of those things like you don't have that conversation? I suppose it's understood that there's a love, there's a passion here.
That, and realistically, I'm not. I'm going to be convinced and statistically convinced that this is relatively safe. You know, like again in the 99% safe.
Yeah.
Again, there's things that people do every day that are less safe than this. You know,
like you riding a motorcycle.
Again, yeah, riding a motorcycle, doing wheelies at over 100 mile an hour. Not
you did wheelies over 100. What? What? All right.
I'm not a smart guy always. Okay.
Well, you know,
formation flying in the fighter jets was likely a more dangerous thing.
Yes.
Than what I'll be doing in spaceflight.